Good evening, everyone. As principal, it's my happy duty to introduce this inaugural lecture, The Economics of Persuasion and Strategic Information Manipulation, to be delivered by Professor Andy Zapechelnyuk of the School of Economics and Finance. Today's inaugural lecture is necessarily online. In the same pandemic context, we are unable to host our conventional drinks reception after the event, but this lecture format has the advantage nonetheless of enabling staff and students to join us from a variety of locations. In keeping with our traditions, Professor Zapechelnyuk will deliver his inaugural lecture following this introduction, and today's event will conclude with a vote of thanks from the Assistant Vice Principal, Dean of Learning and Teaching, Professor Frank Lorenz Müller. Again, following our conventions, there will not be a question and answer session, but the team's Q&A function has been made available so that you can interact with today's lecture by leaving comments and notes. And Professor Zapechelnyuk has kindly agreed to follow up with people who ask questions and provide their contact details. Do take advantage of this opportunity. Collaboration and internationality are a hallmark of good academic work, which we recognise in the Global St Andrews theme of the university strategy, because such qualities lead to enriched perspectives and greater networks upon which one can draw to inform teaching and research. Andy demonstrates this through a career that has developed across national boundaries. Andy obtained his Bachelor of Science degree in Economics Cybernetics from the Taras Shevchenko National University of Kiev in 1999, following which he completed an MA in economics at the Kiev Mahila Academy. This postgraduate program was established by the Economics Education and Research Consortium with the specific purpose of generating a pipeline of world-leading Ukrainian economists through a singular two-year English language program. And in 2014, Andy was recognized by Forbes Ukraine as one of the top 3 national economists, attesting to the success of this initiative. Andy relocated to the United States for postgraduate research, and he gained his PhD in economics from the State University of New York at Stony Brook in 2005. Thus, with a student career already spanning 2 continents, Andy assumed a series of postings across Europe. From the US, he transitioned to a postdoctoral fellowship at the Center for the Study of Rationality at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. And after 2 years in Israel, he returned to Kiev, first as an assistant professor at the Kiev School of Economics, then as a senior economist at Kiev Economics Institute. Andy moved once more to assume a research fellowship at the University of Bonn's Hausdorff Center for Mathematics in 2008. And I should add that Bonn, which in its 2 centuries of teaching has produced some of the finest researchers and students of the modern world, including theoreticians such as Karl Marx and Jürgen Habermas, is one of this university's foremost international partners, a collaboration we formalized through a major partnership agreement in 2018. Researchers such as Andy, with his shared experience of 2 academic cultures, enrich this partnership immeasurably. In 2010, Andy took up his first posting in the UK at Queen Mary University of London, first as a lecturer, then as a senior lecturer in 2012. Andy moved to Scotland to assume a professorship at the Adam Smith Business School at the University of Glasgow in 2013, and he was subsequently appointed Professor of Economics at the University of St Andrews in 2017, an appointment we recognise and celebrate today. This extraordinary institutional experience does not allow for the breadth of Andy's engagement with other universities, including research visits to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, the University of New South Wales, and other universities in Vienna, Milan, and Louvain-la-Neuve. And last year, Andy organised a symposium on communication and persuasion with a colleague at Emory University in Atlanta, another of this university's significant and long-standing institutional partners. Andy brings this global perspective to bear upon theoretical issues which cross national and language barriers. Indeed, a substantial focus of his research into microeconomics is in itself on communication, as well as optimal information disclosure, optimal non-monetary contracts, and robust decision theory. Andy has pioneered our understanding in these areas throughout his publication career, and latterly through an ESRC-funded project on theoretical foundations and design of persuasion mechanisms from 2017 to 2020. His insights into economic theory and communications are felt profoundly in the classroom, with Andy yielding exemplary satisfaction scores from undergraduate through to research levels. This satisfaction derives, no doubt, from Andy's capacity to make complex theory readily understandable and tangible to his students. And we will all feel the benefits of this in today's lecture on the modelling of persuasion. We are really fortunate to have Andy as a member of our academic community, and it is a pleasure now to welcome Professor Andy Zapechelnyuk to deliver his inaugural lecture, The Economics of Persuasion and Strategic Information Manipulation.
Thank you very much for a very nice introduction. I would like to welcome everybody who comes to this session to listen to my talk. And I also would like to thank everybody who has been involved in organization of this event in these difficult times. So I'm going to talk about the economics of persuasion and strategic information manipulation. And let me start with the question, what is a persuasion? And well, we know what the persuasion is. What is important is what I mean by this term in the context of my research. And what is this? This is a technical term, okay? This is a technical term for, I'm just trying to see if it appears on the slide. Okay, so it does appear. Okay, this is a technical term for systemic distortion and manipulation of information with the purpose of influencing someone's beliefs and decisions. So let me tell you what the persuasion is not about. This is not about lying. This is not about telling the incorrect information. This is about telling the truth, but the possibly distorted truth. It's about deliberately hiding information or selectively revealing facts. It's about generalizing or omitting the details. It's about cherry-picking data with the purpose of manipulating some statistical tests results. And a simple example is revealing successes and hiding failures. The central concept of persuasion is credibility. Basically, when I'm delivering a message to somebody and I want to persuade somebody to take certain action, if the information that I give is not credible, then I'm not going to convince anybody. So the information has to be credible. And in some sense, so this is to emphasize that this is not about lying. This is about telling the truth, but you want to tell the truth in the way that you find it more convincing. So truth has many faces. There is a saying, and persuasion is about telling that selected truth that leads the other person to do what you want them to do. So another important point is that the focus of this idea of this notion of persuasion is on systemic influence through information manipulation. So this is not a one-off event. This is not that somebody tells somebody else to persuade that person to do something. This is about a repeated interaction. This is about a system in equilibrium or in steady state. This is about the procedure of how information is being delivered from the source to the destination. This is about some systems, the legislature, the regulations. Let me bring up this famous quote, which is attributed to Abraham Lincoln. You can fool all the people some of the time, and some of the people all the time, but you cannot fool all the people all the time. And this is exactly what this is going to be about. In order to persuade somebody, you need to deliver them good news, so they're persuaded that something is happening. But to do so, they also have to be the bad news sometimes, so that when you tell them it's a good news, they believe to you, and they act according to their belief. So why is this important? Let me give you some examples. The first example is about prosecution presenting evidence. So the prosecutor follows some rules. So it's not completely arbitrary. Right? There are a lot of rules and regulations how the evidence should be presented in court. However, there is still a lot of freedom of how to do that. So the prosecutor can selectively choose the evidence to present. The prosecutor can selectively choose the witnesses to call, and they can even choose which forensic tests to perform. So there is quite a lot of freedom in this, and this interaction between the prosecutor, who potentially wants to persuade the judge or the jury that the defendant is guilty, so this interaction between the prosecutor and the jury is actually captured by this idea of persuasion, and can be modeled using this idea. So another example I would like to bring up is financial conduct authority disclosing information about the viability of banks or pension funds or entities like this. This is a very important topic, because so what happens if this information is disclosed to the public, and the public starts panicking about this, and then start withdrawing their money from the banks, and the banks start and the bank that could have survived otherwise, it actually goes bankrupt. That puts a strain on the banking system, and it could lead to quite a serious consequences on the economy. On the other hand, if we don't disclose any information to people about the banks, then this creates a distorted incentives for the bank management. This creates the incentives for the bank management to take the deals that are too risky, that are unnecessarily risky from the perspective of the bank as a whole, or from the perspective of the depositors and investors. So the management has this interest to make such decisions, because they can further their career, they can lead to hefty bonuses, and if this information is hidden, never revealed to public, that allows them to do that. So it's important to understand how this information should be revealed, and in what way, and in what capacity, and how exactly that should happen. Another example, maybe a bit closer home, is it's about higher education institutions that need to inform potential employers about their graduates. And why do they want to do this? They want to convince the employers to hire their graduates. And this is usually done through a degree classification. And the question you might ask, is this the best way to do this? So maybe there are, so basically what is happening is the persuasion problem that the universities want to persuade the employers by giving them partial information about the graduates. And the question is this a good way of doing this? And maybe using certain criteria and using this framework of persuasion, we can try to analyze the situation and try to understand whether we can change it for better in some way. So let me give a couple of 3 more examples. And this is exactly the examples I'm going to talk about for the remainder of this talk. I'm going to talk about transparency and censoring in media. I'm going to talk about public debates, and I'm going to talk about internet platforms using consumer reviews. And let us try to see how, using the economic formalism, we can actually capture the idea of persuasion and strategic information manipulation, and whether we can understand better the situations that I just mentioned, and whether we can obtain some tangible and testable implications and ideas and insights from this. Okay, so let me move on to the first topic I would like to talk about, and this is media censoring, or the informed voter problem. Imagine that there is a two-party election, and in this election there is a government, the incumbent government, and there is opposition. There is also a variable that summarizes how well the incumbent government has been doing during its term, and this is I'm going to call this variable a state of affairs, or just for short, a state. So this variable it's something that the voters need to know in order to decide whether they would like to vote for the incumbent government or for the opposition. So the voters do not know the state of affairs, but they can learn about the state through media. And let's suppose that the incumbent government can influence the content of the media. In this model, I'm going to go to quite drastic extreme. I'm going to assume that the government can directly shut down the media outlets they don't want to operate. Okay, I'm saying it is an extreme, but in fact, this is the fact of life. And we don't need to go back far in history to see where it happened. So let's go back to the example in the Russian Federation in 2014. It's not that long ago. What happened in 2014? There was a pro-Kremlin news site called politonline.ru, and this site published a list of top 20 most disloyal media outlets in Russia. How did they determine which media outlets were most disloyal, and according to what criteria? Well, they actually conducted quite a sophisticated study, and so they measure the frequency with which media outlets use keywords and phrases that tend to discredit government actions. And by using this count, the frequency of using such words and phrases, they identified they ranked the media outlets in Russia, and then they published the top 20 in this list. What happened next? Russian political scientist and government advisor Alexander Dugin suggested that this list should be the order in which the government should shut down these media outlets, and then, using a broadly formulated legislation on combating extremism, the government agency Roskomnadzor, which is responsible for overseeing the media and mass communications, has taken actions to effectively shut down a number of media outlets at the top of the list. And then leader of opposition and a former chess champion, Garry Kasparov, tweeted in response to this crackdown, "These are huge news sites, not political groups. Giant Echo of Moscow site now just gone. Grani, EJ, Navalny blog, all blocked in Russia. The Russian leading opposition television channel Dozhd lost its main cable and satellite providers. In 2014, The Guardian reported several news companies have had their editors fired, while others have lost studio space. The Siberian TV channel TV2, for example, was forced to shut down, and its owner said to The Guardian, "We were under constant pressure to change our editorial policies. We were not an opposition channel, we were simply give everyone an opportunity to speak." So this is just to say that this is a relevant problem even now, and let's go back to our model. Imagine that there is a spectrum of media outlets. There are many of them, and they are located along the line. And on the left of the line, there is a government, and on the right of the line there is opposition, and the location of these media outlets along this line would tell you how much they're aligned to close to the government or close to the opposition. So what is the alignment is along this line? So imagine that there are many of such governments, many such media outlets, and these media outlets, for simplicity, we're going to assume that they're sending binary messages. They either endorse or criticize the government. Well, this is just to fix the ideas. This is not the and this is not a very big assumption. But if you think about it, this is actually quite a realistic assumption, because in the modern world, many voters are rather impatient, and they're cursory readers. They have preferences for simple messages. They want to be told whether the news is positive or negative, whether their opinion is positive or negative, whether the recommendation is yes or no, and whether they should vote for the government and whether they should vote for opposition. So now, if you imagine this a media outlet which is a government-aligned one, is close to the government, what should media outlet do? Well, they should endorse the government. Well, what they're doing, they're endorsing the government unless the government is doing extremely bad. Now, you could ask, why would they just not always endorse the government? If they are aligned with the government, why wouldn't they just always say the government is great? Well, then the reason is that if they do so, they would be completely uninformative. They would convey no information to people. So if they always say the government is great, that is not going to convince anybody to vote for the government, because that brings no new information. That doesn't tell people anything that they did not know before. So in order to give some information by delivering good news, there has to be also sometimes the bad news, and which is why the media outlets would sometimes tell you that the government is doing fine, but sometimes if it's not doing fine, they're going to tell you that it's not. And the government-aligned ones are just going to be really, so the government has to do really bad in order for these ones to tell you not to vote for the government. Now, conversely, similarly, the opposition-aligned media outlets are going to most of the time criticize the government, but if the government is doing it really, really well, they will admit that the government is actually doing well, and go ahead and vote for it. So let's look at this picture here, and there are a few things going on this picture. You can see the horizontal line here, the horizontal axis, and along this axis there are a few things. One is, this is the position of the state of affairs of the government. So, the government is doing somewhere along this line, and when it's close to the origin, it means the government is doing extremely bad, and close to this side, the right side, means the government is doing extremely well. And just to get your head around this, just imagine that the state of affairs is here, so the government is doing pretty well. What does this mean? Think of that as a position of the indifferent voter. This is the voter, the position of the voter who is indifferent between voting for the government or voting for the opposition. So everybody, all the voters who are sitting on the left of this are closer to the government. They're going to vote for the government, and all the voters who are sitting on the right of here, so the more aligned to the opposition, they will vote for opposition. So the closer the red dots to the right, the more voters the government gets. So the closer the red dot to the right, the better the government is doing. Okay, so this just to get the idea of the reason why this is like that. Now, let me go back for a second. Yes. Now, what else happens along this horizontal line? The media outlets are located along this line. So the different media outlets, there are many of them. Let's say one here, one here, one here, here. There are quite a few of them, and and the position along this line shows the editorial policy of this media outlet. For example, this one here is very much government aligned. And this editorial policy of this media outlet says that it should endorse the government whenever the true state of affairs is on the right, somewhere here, and should criticize the government when the state of affairs is on the other side. So basically, most of the time, this media outlet is going to endorse the government unless the government is doing extremely bad, in which case it's going to criticize. That's the government-aligned media outlet. And on the other end of it, we have the opposition one. So for example, this one over here, it's close to opposition aligned, means most of the time it's going to criticize the government, but if the government happens to do extremely well, then it's going to endorse it. Okay, so that's what is happening along the horizontal line. And we also have the voters here. And the voters are also located along this horizontal line. They are located along. And the position of a voter signifies the ideologies. They're close to the government ideology or they're close to the opposition ideology. And this blue curve here shows the density of this. So basically, this shows you where these voters are along this line. And in my picture here, for now at least, in this picture, the voters are very single-minded. They're all concentrated around this peak over here. Okay, so which means that most of the voters are actually quite pro-government in this picture. So the first question, what the government should be doing here, what kind of media outlet the government should censor in order to get the maximum support from the voters. And we're going to start with the opposite end. Let's suppose that the government already censored everybody, and the question is who they should permit to operate, who they should permit to broadcast. And the answer in this question, they should permit to broadcast nobody. Basically, they should only let the extreme pro-government media outlet to operate that only says the government is great and conveys no information whatsoever, and let the voters stay in the dark. Why is that? Because the voters who are in the dark, they don't know what the state of affair is, so they would figure out it somewhere in the middle. So this is this point, the M star point, that's where it is. And most of the voters are located to the left of this. So from their perspective, this state of affairs is fine enough, is good enough to vote for the government. But there would be a small number of voters who are discontent with this and they would vote against, but the government basically captures the vast majority of the population. So they should reveal nothing. The situation is quite different if the population is actually closer to the opposition. So now this peak over here is where they're close to, this peak over here shows you that they're to the right of the middle point. So if the government is doing nothing, reveals no information to people, then most of them are going to vote against the government. They're going to vote for the opposition, and only a small portion of the voters will vote for the government. So what the government needs to do is to let some information about the state of affairs in. And here's what they're going to do. So what they will do, they will disclose the state of affairs when it is on this side, and censor and do not reveal the state when it's on this side. So the way they do it, for example, they could allow this media outlet to operate. They could also allow some other media outlets over here to operate. But it's important that this media outlet operates here. And this media outlet is going to bring either good news or bad news. The good news is that the state of affairs is over here, somewhere over here. And the people will figure out, okay, so this media outlet says the state, it's good news. It must be the case that the state is over here. So on average, must be somewhere here, which means that the majority of the population is going to vote for the government when the news is good. Of course, the problem of this is that what the government has sacrificed to achieve this is the fact that sometimes the news have to be bad. And this has to be the case because otherwise this information, the message that there is a good news, would not be credible, and the citizens would not believe it, right? So So by changing the information that people get, the government can now achieve the majority of people vote for the government, at least when the news is good. Okay. Now, what you could ask now, you might be wondering now, why am I so much interested in the situation where the population is so much single-minded? Why it's so concentrated around around this peak here? Well, let's look at a situation where the population is actually more dispersed. So the opinions in the population are much more dispersed now. What changes? Well, if the government were only concerned with getting the majority of the population, then nothing changes. The government would still get the majority. So everybody to the left of the red line are going to vote for the government. That's still the majority. However, there are many reasons to think in practice that the parties are worried, they are concerned not just to get a majority, but also about the real support, about the numbers of people who support them. Because it makes difference if you win the election with a 51% of people supporting you, or if you win elections with 75% of people supporting you. It also matters if you lose elections with a 49% supporting you, and if you lose with 25% supporting you. So, and the tangible way of how it manifests is that in many political systems, the number of seats in the parliament is proportional to how many voters support you. So the government could care about not just getting the majority, but they might be worried that in this situation there are a lot of voters over here. There are a lot of them now who are actually voting against. And what they can do, they can disclose more information. So they can take this threshold here and shift it further to the right, like this. So they will create the good news now. The good news is over here. That's where the good news is, and the average state of affairs is going to be here, and there will be more people now voting for the government when the news is good. Well, this comes also at a cost, because now the threshold for the good news, the criterion for the good news is more stringent. Now the good news has to be really good in order to be to classify it like this. So they are losing more when the news is not good over here. However, the main point that I would like to make here is that when the population is more diverse, there is more incentive for the governments to reveal more information to the public. Okay, so let's summarize. And let me first say that it might sound what I'm interested in is what the government should be doing. How the optimal way to censor media? And let me say that this is not what I'm interested in. What I'm interested in is to understand the system, and using the model of persuasion to understand and to and now, if I understand it well, I can now say what kind of features of political systems make what kind of features make a good ground or a good environment for free media to exist, and what kind of features actually make no free media or less free media. Okay, so what kind of features what kind of political systems are more democratic in the sense that the voters are more informed when they vote, and what kind of systems are less democratic in the sense that the voters are in the dark when they vote. Okay, so this is what I want to ask, and the simple exercise that we've just done now shows what is happening, right? So when the population is more aligned with the opposition, the government is going to reveal more information, so there will be more free media. When the population is more diverse, there will be more free media. And when the political system is such that it rewards not just the majority, not just getting the majority of the support, but the actual amounts of the support, those political systems, they they have more free media. They motivate the incumbent government to permit more free media. You can also notice that there is a causality problem here. And the causality problem says that, well, why the government permits no free media? Why the authoritarian government permits no free media? Well, because the population is already pro-government. They're single-minded. They're pro-government. There is no need to tell them anything because they're already voting for the government. Why would you want to tell them something? But maybe they are single-minded and pro-government simply because there isn't any free media, and they don't receive the information they need to change their mind. Okay, so and it becomes a vicious circle. All right, let's move on to the next topic. And the next topic I would like to talk about is the problem of debates, and I'm going to compare open and moderated debates. And this is again a political setting. There are two parties engaged in a public debate. And this is the debate about, for example, whether some policy should be implemented or not. Let's say whether a healthcare reform should be implemented, or whether we should gain independence from the rest of the United Kingdom, or whether the federal budget should give more subsidies to the universities and things like that, right? So there is a policy that is being debated. And one party supports the policy, the other party opposes the policy. And there is also a quality of this policy. And the quality is simply the true consequences of that policy to be implemented. And let's assume that this policy, so the quality of the policy is not known to the public, but the public can obtain information about this through the debate between the parties. So what is the debate? Well, by the debate, I mean that these parties get together, and so they invite participants, they invite experts, and these people talk about this issue, and some information is revealed through these debates to the public who watch what is happening there. So it could be like the debates on the TV, could be debates on the social media, and so there are participants who voice their opinions, and then the listeners could observe these opinions, and they can make some conclusions. So we are going to have three types of participants in the debate. These are experts, activists, and bots. The experts are like the professional experts. They know, or they can figure out the real consequences of implementing the policy. However, they're biased. And by biased, I exactly mean the idea of persuasion. So they do not want to reveal the information truthfully to the public. They are not going to lie, but they will reveal distorted information. They will probably hide some. They could hide some information. They could selectively reveal facts, right? And moreover, not just experts are biased. The parties actually choose which experts to invite, which means that the parties would invite those experts whose bias is more aligned with what the parties want them to say. Right, so this is an important selection process going on here. So the rest of the participants are kind of representative of the communities. They're representative of the interested beneficiaries. They could be just some members of the public. So there could be some public activists. It could be representatives of the political opposition. So there could be lots of different people who have some information, some partial information about the issue at hand. And once we listen to these, to all these participants, all these activists, I just call them activists in quotation marks. It is possible to understand a lot more about the issue. Okay, but also not only there are activists, there are also bots, and bots are simply those activists that are hired by the parties to express what the parties want them to say, right? So they are not expressing genuine opinions. they're simply speaking on behalf of the parties that hired them. Let's imagine that there are listeners of this debate, and this is the public, and the listeners have limited attention. So if the debate goes on forever, if it just keeps going, and at some point they just say, okay, I had enough of this, I stop listening, and I leave. And also, so that's one point. Another point is that the listeners are going to be able to, they know who the experts are, but they won't be able to distinguish activists and bots. So from their perspective, somebody is making a statement, or they're expressing their opinion, and they don't know whether this person is actually speaking genuinely what they think about the issue they're debating, or maybe this is a bot who's been hired by the party to say what the party wants them to say. Okay, the debates, we are going to compare two kinds of debates, open debate and a moderated debate. And the distinction is very simple. In the open debate, it's a large capacity debate. So there are many people can participate, basically as many as just prefer to join and participate. And the example of that would be Facebook debates. In the Facebook, the people can leave comments, they can leave comments of comments, and that can go on, and many people can join this discussion, and this could be really lengthy discussions. The other kind of debate is a moderated debate. It has small capacity, it's by invitation only, and the counterpart on social media is the Clubhouse. So this is the one where the organizers of the debate, they invite people to participate. So if there are like the two parties that are debating the issue, the parties will receive some quotas, how many participants they can invite, and this is by invitation only. And okay, so what are why we want these formats? What are the advantages of the open debate? The main advantage is the wisdom of the crowd. Is the fact that we can listen to opinions to many people. All of them have partial information. All of them have some different angles on the issue. But this is many pieces of the puzzle. And once we piece all of these together, we can see the big picture. So that's the idea. It's quite important idea, and this is not happening in moderated debate. But remember, the other side of this is that the listeners have a limited attention. They're not going to be able to observe lengthy debates. So the moderated debate advantage is that the listeners, they can observe everybody who is there to speak. Okay, now let's get to the root of the problem. And the real root of the problem is in the fact that the participation in this debate is controlled by the parties, by the interested parties. And these two parties, how they control the participation. In the moderated debate, they literally control it because they invite participants. In the open debate, they control it indirectly. Well, they do invite participants, they invite experts, they can also hire the bots. But you can argue that, well, there are still lots of activists join. So how do they control that? Well, the problem is that whenever there are activists in the debate, the parties have incentive to add more bots. Why? Because so imagine that listeners who have limited attention, they will listen to some statements made during the debate, and basically they listen to some random statements. So they can see some of those. They don't know whether these statements are made by bots or activists. And if there are many activists in the debate and a few bots, what you want to do as a party, you want to add your own bots. So that the activists, who knows what they're going to say? They might support you, they might support your opponent, but if you add a bot, chances are that the listener is going to happen to listen to your bot rather than the activist, and the bot is going to tell them what you want them to tell. So the parties have incentives. It's a dominant incentives to add more bots to these events. And basically, this leads to the problem that these events are simply crowded by bots. They're spammed by bots. And it's very, very hard to get any information whatsoever from such debates, which leads to the problem that crowdsourcing of information simply does not occur. Okay. However, there could be still useful information delivered through the expertise. And let's talk about this. And to get a little bit of the idea, let's compare these debates to the information monopoly. What is information monopoly? This is the case when there is no debate, when there is just a single party decides how much information to give to the public. And this is exactly the case that we've just talked before in the other topic, in the topic of the government controlling through the media. So the government controlling the media is the information monopolist. So the question is, how do the debate have advantage over the information monopolies? And if you think about it, the open debates, they don't have this advantage because the parties have strong incentives to add more and more bots to these events, leading to these events being uninformative. So this is a waste of time of listeners who come to listen to these events, and they don't get anything from there. And this is also the wasted resources of the parties who have to hire these bots, and the bots probably cost money. So open debate is generally worse because it doesn't reveal any information, and it's costly to run. Now, the moderated debate, on the other hand, is generally better. Why is it better? Because there is a competition between the two parties for the voters, for the opinion of the population, of the public. And in this competition, yes, it's true that each party is biased. And yes, it's true, the parties are going to hire the biased experts. They're going to invite the biased experts to represent them. But in doing so, they're going to reveal more information than would have been done by information monopolies. So we already know that information monopolies usually have interest to reveal some information in order to persuade people. So we already seen that before. But now what I'm saying is that when we put the parties against each other, they're going to reveal a lot more. Okay, so let's summarize. The open debates are socially harmful because they are costly and uninformative. And the moderated debates are socially useful because they pitch the parties against each other. And in the process, the parties happen to reveal information. And another point is that the idea of organizing the debates as the source of information from the crowd, the crowdsourcing of information, is actually misleading because this is not happening during these events. And whatever information is being revealed through the debates is actually comes through the expertise. Okay, so in the remaining maybe 5 minutes, let me talk about the last topic I wanted to talk about. And this is about fake consumer reviews. Well, you know, there are many popular internet platforms for goods and services that use consumer review systems in the form of, they ask consumers to give feedback, to give scores, to provide scores for the products or services they used. And then they aggregate these scores to some aggregate ratings, and then they let the new consumers observe these ratings to decide whether or not to buy the products. And what is the purpose of a consumer review system, and why it sounds like a good idea? Well, one point is that it is to inform new consumers about the quality of the product or service by reviews of previous customers. Right, by observing reviews of previous customers, which is a good idea. So now you can learn about the products that you want to buy. The second point is that it's going to provide incentives to producers to improve the quality, because they know their products are going to be judged by the quality, and they're going to be judged by the end users of these products So it's going to be important to provide good quality. And the question is, does the system actually do the job? Unfortunately, the answer is there are serious problems with this. Okay, so let's first talk about some features of the system. And the first feature of the system is that the consumers who provide reviews have variation of tastes and preferences, which means that whatever feedback they're giving, it's very noisy. So in order for this to work, it has to be the case that there is a large number of reviews. So it's a law of large number that's going to work. When there is a small number of reviews, they're likely to be very noisy and not reliable, right? So that's one feature. The second feature is that the star ratings, these aggregate ratings, they usually a simple average. So they ask many consumers to report this, to provide scores to the products, and then they simply average out those scores, right? So this is what is happening. And the peculiarity of the system is that there is a decreasing value of every next review. So if you have very few reviews, every next review is extremely valuable because it changes your score dramatically. But if you have many reviews, if you have a huge number of reviews, then every next review basically changes nothing, right? And this is going to be important. Just keep this in mind. We're going to talk about this. And the last feature I would like to mention is that there is a possibility to add fake reviews. And in fact, it is fairly inexpensive to do so, and it's fairly easy. I'm not going to tell you, I don't have time to tell you how exactly this is done. So there are quite a few methods, but let me just talk about a journalist, Mr. Uwe Butler. And so this journalist worked for Vice magazine in 2017. And what he did, he asked the question, can he fabricate a restaurant on TripAdvisor which physically doesn't exist, and yet that can obtain #1 rating in London? And Mr. Butler was going to do this using fake reviews. Okay. Well, of course, this is for journalism, for journalism purpose only. And the answer is yes, he could. Moreover, not only he could do this, the TripAdvisor did not detect this fake restaurant, nor the manipulated reviews. Well, just to give you a bit more details, this restaurant is called the Shed at Dulwich. And apparently, as you can see from this picture, Mr. Butler had a lot of fun creating this fake restaurant. And so he asked his friends to, sorry, I skipped the slide. He asked his friends to provide fake reviews, and this is an example on the slide of such a fake review. And then, after a little bit, after a short while, actually, you can see that just 104 reviews in this restaurant, voila, #1 in London, on the TripAdvisor rating. If you want to know more about this, there are a couple of links here. Oops, sorry, let me go back. So there are a couple of links here, and it is a really fun story. I recommend it. But let's go back to our question here, and you might wonder, what is happening? How is it the case that consumer review platforms do not detect and delete fake reviews? Aren't they supposed to do so? Well, actually, they claim they are. But in fact, if you think about it, they have incentive to slack on this task. Why? Because so let's say you want to go and list and put your product on eBay. Well, it's very cheap to put your product on eBay. What is expensive though is to get your product featured, to make it appear in the top of the searches, to make it somehow prominent, to make it sponsored, to put it in a frame, something like to make it stand out of everybody else. That's very expensive, and that's where the money that these platforms, the review platforms, this is how they make their profits. So the problem is that when there are more top-rated firms around, more top-rated competitors around, you gain more by paying for this, for these featured services. Well, guess what? Fake reviews contribute into the number of top-rated firms around there, even if not all of those top-rated firms are actually top-rated. Okay, so I mentioned two things that this consumer review system is supposed to do. One is they're supposed to inform consumers, and two, they're supposed to provide incentives to the quality. So are they actually informing consumers? Well, if there are very few reviews, both quantity and quality of additional reviews are extremely important for the firms. So basically making or breaking the business. So the new businesses have very strong incentives to provide fake reviews. So what we can conclude is that if there are not too many reviews, and as you can see in the restaurant, the Shed in Dulwich, it's just 104 reviews. When the number of reviews is small, this is basically not really trustworthy. Well, when there is a large number of reviews, maybe, but when a small number of reviews, this is not going to be reliable. So what about the quality? Well, the problem of this is that if the sales are predominantly dependent on the consumer review ratings, then new businesses are probably better off investing in fake reviews than quality. Why? So imagine you have a limited amount of resources and you want to decide what you want to do. You want to invest into quality, or you want to invest into fake reviews. What is it you want to do? Now, if you invest in quality, you don't even know you get good reviews, because maybe they're going to be picky consumers who will leave you bad reviews anyway. But if you invest in fake reviews, you are guaranteed to get good reviews, right? So this is pretty much easy choice to make. So the businesses are not really motivated to invest in quality at the start. Now, how they're doing when they're established and when they have already lots of reviews under their belts? Well, in this case, the return on every next review is very, very small. So basically, by investing in the quality, you're going to improve the reviews. But because you already have so many reviews, every next review basically doesn't change anything. So it's going to take a while until your investment into quality will pay off. And because this and the bigger the number of reviews you have, the lower incentives you have to invest into quality. So the summary of this is that there is a problem. So it's not clear whether the system works as it's designed to work, whether it provides incentives for the firms, whether new firms or established firms, to provide quality of the products. Okay, so let me mention at the end that we have a fantastic data set that comes from a major consumer website. It's a very popular one. I'm not going to tell you which one. And using this data, we're going to test it here. We're going to see whether it is true that the new firms have a lot of fake reviews and what is happening there. And so we're gonna see that, and we are going to test. We are going to use algorithms to detect fake reviews. And let me just quickly answer this question. I think I'm out of time, but let me just quickly answer the potential question. How do we do this? How can we detect fake reviews when the websites do not? And the answer is, well, one, we are impartial. We are not, so the websites, they have vested interest in not detecting the reviews, and we do not. And the second, it's a different matter to detect a fake review and to delete a fake review, because to delete a review, you need to prove it's fake. And we don't need any proof. We just need a statistically significant indication that it is. And this is work in progress. And that's all for. Thank you very much.
Principal, colleagues, guests, and above all, dear Professor Zapechelnyuk. Delightful though it remains, my task of offering a vote of thanks to tonight's inaugural lecture has not been made any easier by the forensic analysis to which Andy has just subjected the art of persuasion. I fear that he will train his audience rather too well for me to get away with my usual toolkit. The manipulation I tend to inflict on the information I present on these occasions, the highly selective application of the truth, largely the fruit of a few minutes of vigorous Googling, and the use of predictable bot-like prose, none of this will probably cut the mustard with you anymore. Through tonight's lecture and the research on which it rests, you and other beneficiaries of Andy's scholarship have been vaccinated, to use a topical verb, against falling prey to easy persuasion and the manipulation of information. That's a great boon for you and for society more widely, for everyone who participates in political or economic systems, but it's a downright nuisance for panegyrists. So I'll have to skip over my planned compliments on the cogent manner in which Andy has interlinked media censoring, the formal framing of debates, and the production as well as consumption of consumer reviews, fake or otherwise. I'll also say very little about how enlightening I found his explanation of why the degree and nature of governmental censorship of the media depend on any government's reading of the mood of the audience, rather than on the content of the broadcast material. And lest my selectivity become too obvious, I will refrain from engaging with the fascinating concept of the sacrifice for credibility, which will really sharpen our collective awareness of how and why certain information is released to us. Instead, I've decided to dwell on just one of the many points Andy has made so well this evening, the one I found the most arresting and the most concerning. That in an age of digital communication and sophisticated bots, open debates are socially harmful. Andy's observations on this point have profound implications, not just for the nature of the democratic process and our ability to have confidence in the decisions reached as a result of it. It challenges some of the central tenets of Enlightenment thinking, such as the belief in the ability of the reasonable individual to make a positive contribution to the public debate and to do so, as Immanuel Kant famously put it, without another's guidance. In a cruelly ironic twist, it is progress, the breathtaking technological progress in computation and artificial intelligence, the appearance of bots, and the almost irresistibly subtle manipulation of information flows that has led to this worrying state of affairs. Too many participants in open debates are no longer able to free themselves of these influences to make open debates beneficent. Open debates become uninformative. We have disabled ourselves. Andy has pointed to moderated debates as a better alternative, with the inherent competition amongst the parties drawing in experts who eventually reveal more information. Though this assessment of the viability of open debates may appear bleak, I wonder if we really have reason to be hopeful about the remedies to which Andy has drawn attention, moderators and expertise. Will they have traction in an age of alternative facts and of covidiots? It seems to me that this is precisely the point where scholarship and research must come to our collective rescue. Researchers like Andy will provide calm, candid and crisp analyses that enable others to build and rebuild trust in real expertise, to discern probity from dishonest persuasion, and make debate a forum for sound information rather than a playground for the unscrupulous in their pursuit of the gullible. We're grateful for both the wholesome warnings and the glimmers of hope that Andy has given us today. On behalf of the Faculties of Arts and Divinity and of the University as a whole, I would like to thank him for his contribution as a researcher, teacher, and colleague. Finally, if you found this vote of thanks persuasive, then I'd like to end by asking you to leave a glowing review at www.deanadvisor.co.uk. Thanks to Professor Zapechelnyuk's memorable lecture this evening, all of us now know how to handle this information. Thank you.